Okay, home stretch, changing how you see, how do you eat an elephant, change how you see big things. Key insight here is to remind you that small, not big things are the key leverage points. And again, I could give you tons of people saying this is the case. I just used Peter Senge, but I could provide you so many. Small changes can produce big results, but the areas of highest leverage are often the least obvious. I don't know what it is about us, but we are attracted to like the big, think big, right? But it's actually, as we get more and more knowledgeable about the situation, there's the small thing that can be surprisingly powerful in the leverage point. So think of things not as big, but eating the elephant piece by piece. Try to shrink it into small things. Another thing is to seek shorter feedback loops, i.e. now we're talking again about finding your golf swing, where you get that instantaneous feedback. And one of my favorite stories about this, even though it's kind of dated, is the Wright brothers. So the Wright brothers invented the first kind of motorized flight. The interesting story I heard about them is at the time there were lots of people that were in the race to find the first motorized flight. But what a lot of people would do is they would spend a year building a flying machine and then test it. And then if it didn't work, that's a year gone by. The Wright brothers shortened that feedback loop. So rather than a year, they built wind tunnels, and then they experimented with various kites and other things to instantaneously learn what they need to learn. So anytime you can shorten a feedback loop from a year to 6 months to a month to a week to a day, do it. Like, don't do it irresponsibly in a way that won't actually suit your purposes. But if you can get the key intel you need in a shorter time frame, always look out for that possibility. Number 3, and this is actually one of the biggest surprises that we learned when looking into this, is beware of zombies. So Eric Ries, who's kind of one of the leaders of the lean startup movement, says, the land of the living dead, or zombie ventures, as we like to call them, are stuck in limbo, getting just enough sales to survive, but not growing towards the level of impact they want. The big insight here is I thought going into this process that making bad decisions would kill your venture. That actually doesn't happen that often. For the longest time, people can kick around in these kind of zombie ventures where just enough to live, but not really thrive, and certainly not attacking your why, because they're just getting enough. And I can guarantee you, anytime there's the risk of a zombie venture, it's because there's a broken feedback loop where you're not getting the information from something that you actually need to get better. And there's 2 ways that this can kind of arise. One is surviving versus solving a problem. And this is the second last video that we'll do, and I want to kind of set it up. Again, there's swearing in here, and I apologize. The nature of this video is it's from Silicon Valley, which is a little crude, but there's some of the greatest insights as to how to be an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur you can actually get from Silicon Valley if you're willing to kind of put up with the crudity. It's a HBO series. And the clip that you're about to see, the kind of leader of the company is about to do like a major presentation, and he provides some feedback, and then he goes to have a coffee, and this situation happens. I'd like you to watch the whole video, but what we're finding is with the link I send you, it starts midway through. So you'll have to kind of move the video back to start at the beginning. The beginning is where you see a person move up and using some honey to put in their coffee. Short clip, about 2:34, and there's obviously Winnie the Pooh video that's been added to it, which kind of like pads it. But think of all the dysfunctions in this team in this very short clip. So for example, the team feels like the leader speaks in metaphor, which is usually not a great way to do it. The team itself, when it has a disagreement, immediately goes into factions. The leader himself, when he goes back to the honey at the end of the clip, suggests that nobody listens to him. But because of luck, they survive all those problems and figure out that he's talking about the sticky honey dispenser and not anything else. All the things that they have, such as a leader that feels he's never listened to, a staff that feels their leader speaks in parables that they have to then figure out, or teams that immediately compete with each other as opposed to kind of work together. all those very considerable dysfunctions still exist in this story, right? So they have survived rather than solved the problems that beleaguer them. So you're going to have the discipline to make sure that you're not just surviving problems, you're always kind of solving them. Because surviving versus solving a problem is a feedback loop breaker. Another kind of feedback loop breaker, which is very similar to surviving versus solving a problem, is feedback loop breakers that look like they're explanations of something, but don't really give you actionable intel to move forward. So it's not, is there an answer, but is there an answer that then gives actionable insights? So again, you can see we're kind of getting back into the effective learning kind of mentality. And again, it's a sports example, and I apologize for that. It's from the book Influencer. They noticed when they had researchers stop players who missed 2 free throws in a row, so it's a shot at the free throw line, and asked them to explain their failure. And the results were actually quite interesting. They found for master shooters, so people that were really good at shooting, were able to cite the specific technique they got wrong. So for example, oh, I didn't keep my elbow in. For people that were not that great at shooting, they offered vague explanations, such as I lost my concentration. So again, this is just a reminder when it comes to, oh, I just need to try harder, or I just need to have more concentration, or if we just had more money, any kind of vague explanation could be a feedback loop breaker, a actionable insight, or something that's posing as an actionable insight, but really isn't that actionable. And you're going to have the discipline to see through stuff that are posing as explanations versus stuff that is truly actionable. Another way to kind of shrink things is to embrace this concept of affordable loss. Another one of my favorite thinkers, Sarah Sarasvathy, says, rather than looking at what you can gain, base decisions on the acceptable downside rather than a guess about potential upside. So see with things if you can shrink the risk that you would be exposed to by doing them. Next is change what you see. This one of my favorite quotes from a movie called Dead Poets Society, where the lead character says, I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we constantly look at things, that we must constantly look at things in a different way. So again, it's that kind of changing the vantage point that you will get. And once again, you can't always like go somewhere differently to see something or stand on a desk. You have to trick your mind into seeing things differently. So we have some techniques to suggest to you that can change what you see. One is having more than one option. The power of opening up your thinking by having more than one option is like incredible. And I don't mean let's do this or not do this. I mean having like more than one viable possible option to something. And what we're finding is not just 1 or 2 options. It's just like force yourself to think about as many as 7 options. That really gets the creative juice growing. And don't judge them. Don't say they have to be perfect. Just come up with 7 options, being as creative as you can. And this can actually not only benefit you in your thinking, it can actually also benefit the person you're dealing with, whether it's someone who's going to use your product or buy your product. So for example, D-Light, which is a very famous social enterprise, found that when they were testing solar lighting with people in villages, if they just gave them one option, it would be very rare that they would actually get a lot of feedback. And they surmise that it's because they know their D-Light is trying to help them, and they feel like it would be critical of them or ungenerous of them or ungrateful of them to then be critical of that product. But as soon as they had 2 possible lighting options, people were much freer with their criticism and input, and it provided absolutely invaluable intel. So try to think of not only more than one option for yourself, but sometimes think of, for those that you want feedback from, giving them more than one option. Do a pre-mortem. So often we kind of focus on what's the best that can kind of happen. Pre-mortem suggests that you look the other way and assume things go wrong. What would be the explanation as to why things fail? So it's almost like the black box in a plane. When a plane crashes, they get the black box to try and figure out when it went wrong. Pre-mortem is anticipating your idea fails and forcing yourself to say, okay, why would it actually fail? And it just gives you a different kind of vantage point that sometimes can get the juices, creative juices, flowing. And be careful here. Pre-mortem is not thinking of everything that can go wrong. We tried this with some summer students and they were kind of overwhelmed with all the minutia of things that can go wrong. It's not everything that can go wrong. It's the things that went wrong that your venture could not recover from. So it's like the fatal things that kind of go wrong. So try to focus on that in your pre-mortem. Just not everything can go wrong, but the most fatal things that would be the cause of your venture failing. And this one, and this is actually the most powerful, and we use it all the time at Trico, you'd be amazed. When a lot's at stake, marinate. And before I actually explain what when a lot's at stake marinate means, we have our last video. It's a very brief video, and I'll be getting the information for you. But while I'm doing that to kind of set it up, obviously right now, for the most part, music is digitized. This video is cute because it tries to talk about people who were selling CDs, which was like the hard copy format that music was in just before music went digital. And while their sales are going down, they're grappling with what to do about the situation. So obviously they're like the incumbent technology that's about to be taken over by next wave technology. And what you'll see in the video is various ideas that were like old ideas that wouldn't have helped them. But at the end, there is one idea provided by a woman who suggests the next wave. And I want you to kind of focus on how the leader responds to this description of what turned out to be like the next wave idea. So this is just a 31-second video, although it has a ton of insights. Let's actually just take 2 minutes. So let's go to 12:46. What's really intriguing about this video is, again, it's a classic example of a kind of a change, a C shift level change in the way technology, so music is consumed. A leader actually has somebody who has like the next wave of how music is going to be consumed. And how he responds is, how is this going to help us sell CDs? One, this is really insightful because it really comes down to what your why is, right? So for example, is this company about selling CDs or is this company about selling music? Because he got the why wrong, it's going to be a decision and a mistake that's going to cost him his business. But the reason I'm mentioning it here is I find that when people are focused on a certain issue and they get one that's really out of the box thinking, they tend to respond in their current mindset. And the way around that is to just let the idea sit and think about it, which is a way of describing marination. So if he would have just not reacted at all and let the idea sit, it would become less foreign. And then there might be a chance that he would not have rejected it out of hand. So when we talk about marination, there's actually two types. And again, this is a profoundly powerful tool. There's active marination, and that's where like you're thinking about an idea while you're on a walk or your shower, or like whatever it is, where you're kind of like thinking about it constantly. And then there's passive marination, and passive marination is particularly powerful. Passive marination is where you stop thinking about an idea and a couple of days or a week go by, and then you return to it. You may not necessarily have that luxury that much for the current kind of program you're kind of going through, but it's something you can tap into. And again, you'd be amazed at how differently you see something after you've either gone away from it or it's like less foreign and it's no longer like a new idea to you. So active marination is, we consider AM, and passive marination PM. Last one in terms of changing our perspective is getting someone else's view. And I'm sure you have in this program the chance to speak to coaches and people like that, perhaps even teammates, who knows. So I know you're doing that, but I just want to bring home the power of those people's opinions. And there's no quote I've come across that better brings home that power than this one by Thomas Schelling. One thing a person cannot do, no matter how rigorous his analysis or heroic his imagination, is to draw up a list of things that would never occur to him. So unfortunately, like so many kind of historical quotes, it's not gender neutral, which I hate, but I also struggle with kind of changing someone's quote. So my apologies for it not being gender neutral, but that doesn't change the fact that there's an amazing insight here in that, again, you will never be able to come up with something that would never occur to you. And that's part of the challenge in getting over obstacles and solving problems. So cherish whenever you speak to somebody and they're providing you their view, the chance of them seeing something that you'll never see is so much higher than yourself. Your chance of seeing something you'll never see is zero. Their chance of seeing something is like substantial. So although you may be disappointed initially in what people say, or it may not be what you think, always again see the value of it being a different perspective that you might never get and tap into the power of it. And again, notice how when we talked about the golf swing, the insight there was they not only got it granular to the golf swing, they found an instructor to help. Essentially what that's bringing home is, again, the value of getting someone else, and of course, the more intel and familiarity they have with the area you're trying to work on, the more informed they will be, and they can be absolutely crucial. So again, I'm mentioning this because I know people consult with people, and that's kind of like a standard protocol for programs like you're going to be going through. But I find people either go through the motions or they profoundly undervalue the insights they can actually get from what people are telling them. So I encourage you to make sure you're not just observing, but you're observing the right way and as effectively as you can as to the signals that other people with different perspectives are giving you.